South China Sea 1809. Imagine a horizon black with sails nearly fun 800 pirate ships stretching farther than the eye could follow. On deck, tar-slick ropes hiss in the salt wind. The air stinks of gunpowder, seaweed and sweat. At the center of this floating empire stood not a king nor an admiral, but a widow, Ching Shih, the pirate queen who commanded 80,000 men. Now picture the unthinkable Britain's navy, the most feared war machine of its time, preparing to break her grip. Muskets loaded, cannons primed. A clash between the world's richest empire and the most ruthless pirate confederation in history. But here's the question no one dares to ask: how did a woman who began as a courtesan bring the Royal Navy to its knees and walk away richer than any pirate alive? Stay with me, because this isn't just a sea battle. It's a chess match on waves, where one wrong move meant annihilation. And the way it ended will shock you. The first shot fired wasn't by Britain, it was by her own men. The empire of red sails. Before we even meet Britain, you need to understand what the British were up against. Ching Shih didn't just command pirates. She built an empire. Her red flag fleet wasn't some ragtag gang, it was a navy larger than Spain's, larger than Portugal's, and even rivaling Britain's presence in the east. Each fleet division had its own admiral, its own discipline, and strict codes that rivaled any European navy. Steal from the common plunder, death. Harm a woman, death, death. Break formation in battle, death. The men feared her more than cannon fire and they obeyed. One fisherman later recalled, when her sails appeared, it was as if the sky had torn open. We sank our boats before she could take them. So what made Britain believe they could tame this storm? Britain's first mistake. By the early 1800s, Britain saw the South China Sea as theirs to dominate. They controlled trade through Canton and demanded tribute. But pirates, especially Ching Shih's, shredded those routes daily. Ships vanished, crews disappeared, insurance rates in London doubled. Britain sent envoys to Qing officials urging them to crush her. The Qing tried, and failed. Their fleets were burned, captured or humiliated. Desperate, Britain began to prepare its own squadrons. But here's the twist: they underestimated her. To London she was just another pirate. To Canton merchants she was a shadow government. And when the British finally sailed out, she was already waiting. The ambush at sea. Eyewitnesses tell us of a morning mist rolling over the Pearl River Delta. British frigates cut silently through the haze, banners fluttering, crews sharp in red coats. They thought they would surprise her. Instead, they sailed straight into a wall of red sails. Ching Shih scouts had been shadowing them for days. She let the British come close, then snapped the trap. Her fleet surged like a tidal wave, thousands of oars thrashing the sea white. The British fired first. Cannon blasts tearing holes in the fog, but their balls struck empty water. Her ships, lighter and faster, swarmed from the flanks. A British sailor later wrote, "It was as if the sea itself had turned against us. They came screaming, banging drums, their gongs shaking the air." But Ching Shih had one weapon the British never expected. Fire as a language. Her ships carried not just cannon, but fire vessels. Junk ships stuffed with straw, tar, and gunpowder. She lit them and drove them straight at the British frigates. The sea boiled with flame. Masts collapsed, rigging snapped, decks scorched. The British tried to maneuver, but their heavier ships turned too slowly. Flames licked their sails as panic spread. Muskets misfired in the smoke. Powder stores were rushed overboard to stop explosions. In the chaos, one British officer shouted, "We'll fight not men, but demons." And yet, the British didn't retreat. They regrouped, disciplined, determined. They thought sheer order would beat raw ferocity. That's when Ching Shih revealed the rules of her game. Rules the British didn't even know they were playing. Rules of the Queen. Unlike any pirate before her, Ching Shih had built a system. She ordered loot shared equally, enforced supply lines, and kept spies inside Canton. She even made deals with merchants, protection money in exchange for safe passage. This wasn't chaos. This was infrastructure. Britain wasn't fighting criminals, they were fighting a shadow state. Her men rode and fought not because they feared death, but because they believed she could make them immortal through legacy. And Britain realized too late that every cannonball they fired was swallowed by numbers. Sink one ship, and 10 more appeared. Mini hook, but the battle wasn't endless. A single betrayal nearly toppled her empire that day. Betrayal in the fog. Midway through the clash, one of her lieutenants broke. Terrified by the British cannons, he signaled retreat, a forbidden act under Ching Shih's code. Panic rippled. A wedge of her fleet turned, scattering into the haze. The British saw an opening. They surged forward, desperate to split her line and punch through. For a heartbeat, it seemed they might succeed. But here's where Ching Shih showed why she was not just a pirate, but a strategist. She executed her lieutenant's betrayal in front of the fleet. Beheaded on deck, his blood staining the planks, while drums thundered the signal no retreat. Fear snapped back into discipline. Her men roared, surging tighter, filling the gap before the British could break through. And in that moment, she turned defense into annihilation. The counter-strike. Her lighter ships darted between the British frigates, hooks biting into hulls, pirates swarming like ants over rails. Musket fire cracked. Blades rang. One British captain described the smell: salt, blood, and burning pitch, hell itself. The British line began to buckle. Sails ripped, hulls shattered, and still the red flag fleet pressed closer. But here's the terrifying part: Ching Shih barely lifted a finger. She stood at the center, issuing commands with fans of colored silk. One flick, and ships moved as if controlled by invisible strings. The British realized they weren't fighting a pirate, they were fighting a general. The British staggered. By nightfall, the battle had raged for hours. The British, exhausted, their powder low, began to pull back. But pulling back in Ching Shih's waters was suicide. She knew the tides, the shoals, the currents. As they retreated, she drove them onto sandbanks, then pounded them with fire ships again. The British line broke. Their retreat became chaos. One survivor wrote later, "Gu prayed the sea would swallow us, for she would not." And yet somehow, this was not the end of the war, but only the beginning. If you're stunned by how one woman bent Britain's navy to her will, drop a like right now, and tell me in the comments, do you think Ching Shih was a pirate, or a queen in disguise? History hides stories like this in plain sight. If you want to hear the next battle, and how empire's blood trying to stop her, hit subscribe. You won't want to miss what comes next. The world takes notice. News of the clash raced across Asia. Merchants whispered in Canton teahouses. The British Navy has been beaten by a woman. King officials, embarrassed, tried to hush the rumors, but they spread faster than sails in wind. London heard too. The Royal Navy, undefeated at Trafalgar just a few years earlier, had been humiliated in waters most of Europe could not even chart. Parliament debated should Britain double down or cut losses, but here was the cruel truth: Britain was not alone. Other European powers, the Portuguese, the Dutch, even the French, had also tasted defeat against her. The South China Sea was becoming Ching Shih's empire, and every foreign flag feared it. And yet, empires are patient. They don't give up after one loss. Britain learns her language. The British knew brute force had failed, so they changed tactics. Instead of fighting fleet against fleet, they tried to cut her supply lines. Merchant convoys began sailing with heavier escorts. They fortified anchorages, bribed local smugglers, and even offered pardons to defectors. This was a shadow war, less about cannon fire, more about starving her empire. For months, British frigates stalked the Pearl River, ambushing isolated pirate ships. Dozens of Ching Shih's captains were captured and executed. But here's where Britain faltered. For every pirate hanged, 3 more joined. Fishermen, peasants, even deserters from Qing garrisons flocked to her banners. Britain could not understand it. To them, she was a criminal. To the locals, she was a protector. And this is where the story takes a darker turn. Because the British were not her only enemy. The Qing complication, the Qing dynasty, desperate to reassert control, began launching its own campaigns against her. Massive fleets, gilded with imperial banners, sailed south. But Ching Shih didn't meet them in open battle. She turned the Qing against themselves. Bribes, sabotage, even marriages. She wove her web tighter. Some Qing admirals even accidentally lost their fleets in storms after suspiciously fat payments appeared in their households. The British watched in disbelief. How could she twist the emperor's navy into her ally? Because Ching Shih didn't just fight with cannonballs, she fought with coin. But coin has 2 faces, and betrayal was always a heartbeat away. A captain's testimony. We have a chilling eyewitness account from a captured British lieutenant, preserved in the archives. His words: "Her fleet does not fight like men, it fights like a machine. The gongs beat, the banners move, and they swarm upon us as if preordained. When she looks across the deck, it is as if she commands not ships, but the sea itself." His testimony circulated in London, and instead of inspiring courage, it bred fear. Politicians whispered that Ching Shih might be unbeatable. But fear has a way of making empires reckless. So Britain decided, if the sea could not crush her, maybe politics could. Divide and conquer. Enter British diplomacy. Envoys began circulating through Canton, offering trade privileges, spreading rumors, even planting spies within Ching Shih's ranks. The plan was simple: fracture her coalition, and slowly cracks appeared. Rival captains grumbled that her lover, Chung Po-tsai, received more loot. Some complained her codes were too strict, men executed for small thefts, or for disobedience. Others whispered, "Why should we serve a woman?" Ching Shih responded as she always did, with terror. Public punishments, executions, drums beating louder than doubt. But this time, fear didn't silence the cracks, it deepened them. And Britain waited like a wolf at the edge of a campfire for the first spark of mutiny. A clash of giants. The next major battle came in 1810. British warships, reinforced and more cautious, cornered part of her fleet near the Baka Tigris Strait, the narrow throat of the Pearl River. This was no ambush. This was Britain's chance to trap her. The strait's cliffs echoed with cannon fire. Smoke blackened the sky. British broadsides tore into pirate junks, splintering wood, throwing men screaming into the tide. For a moment, it seemed the Red Flag fleet might be crushed, but Ching Shih had studied Britain as much as they had studied her. She lured them deeper, into currents she knew better than any admiral. Her fire ship struck again. And this time, she unleashed a tactic terrifying even to her own men. She ordered the scuttling of her own front line, sinking ships to block the strait and trap the British inside. The tide turned red, but victory carried a price, one that even Ching Shih could not pay forever. The cost of power. By 1810, Ching Shih's empire was stretched to its limit. Feeding 80,000 pirates, maintaining thousands of ships, bribing officials, and fighting the most powerful navy in the world drained even her bottomless chest of silver. Discipline frayed, morale weakened. Some lieutenants deserted, others cut secret deals with Britain. And worse, the Qing began to coordinate with the British, an alliance she had once thought impossible. The noose was tightening. One pirate later recalled, "It was not the cannon that frightened us, but the silence." For the first time, she had no plan. And in that silence, the British saw their chance to end her reign. If you're still with me, here's a question for you. Would you have followed Ching Shih, obeying her strict codes, or risked execution by defiance? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to hit like if her empire already has your respect. The final storm, 1810, bled into 1811, and the seas grew restless. Ching Shih's fleet was still vast, but cracks widened daily. Britain pressed harder, Qing forces swarmed closer, and famine gnawed at her supply lines. And then came the final storm. British warships, heavier than before, supported by Portuguese allies, sailed into the South China Sea with one purpose: end Ching Shih. The waves themselves seemed to carry a curse. Thunder cracked, lightning painted the horizon, and as the storm raged, Britain advanced. For the first time, Ching Shih could not control the weather, the tide, or her men's fear. But she could still control the story, and that mattered more than cannon fire. Negotiation or trap? Here is where history splits into whispers. Some records claim Britain and the Qing offered her a truce. Others insist she arranged it herself. Either way, the impossible happened. The pirate queen walked into a tent, unarmed, to negotiate with the very empires sworn to destroy her. Imagine the scene: silk banners of Britain and the Qing, rain dripping from their edges, and Ching Shih striding in, her robes soaked, her gaze unflinching. She demanded amnesty for herself and her men, the right to keep her wealth, and the freedom to live untouched. And here's the part that feels like legend: the empires agreed. But why would the mightiest navies on earth bow to a pirate? Britain's quiet defeat. The truth is chilling. Britain had calculated the cost of fighting her to the bitter end. To destroy the Red Flag fleet entirely would have taken years, drained coffers, and risked losing even more ships. And worse, every battle fed her legend. Every defeat of a European warship became fuel for anti-colonial whispers across Asia. She was not just a pirate queen, she was becoming a symbol. So Britain chose silence. They dressed it as diplomacy, but in truth it was surrender. They allowed her to retire, unpunished, richer than any pirate in history. And that retirement was stranger than the battles she fought. The pirate queen becomes a widow again after stepping off the deck of her last command. Ching Shih did what no pirate had ever done before. She lived peacefully. She opened a gambling house. She raised children. She grew old, wealthy, and untouched by law. The same woman who burned fleets, executed lieutenants, and terrified Britain's navy died quietly in her bed in 1844. Her empire was gone, but her name echoed. Fishermen told their sons, Canton merchants told their daughters, and even British officers muttered her story in pubs far from Asia. But stories twist, and her legend became something even darker. Myth vs. memory. Some claim she still ruled in secret, pulling strings in Canton's underworld. Others swore she had cursed the South China Sea, that no foreign empire could fully tame it because of her ghost. British sailors told tales of a red-sailed ship appearing in storms, vanishing as quickly as thunder. Pirates long after her death claimed they still followed her code. A phantom constitution of the seas. And here's the haunting truth: Britain may have erased many pirate names from history, but not hers. Ching Shih became immortal not by cannon fire, but by memory. And memory, as we know, is sometimes sharper than steel. The lesson Britain never learned. What can we learn from this? Britain, with all its discipline, cannons, and empires, lost to a woman who understood one thing better than any admiral: control. Control of men. Control of fear. Control of story. Ching Shih knew that battles aren't only fought with ships, they are fought with reputation. And reputation, once built, can sink navies before a cannon is even fired. So ask yourself this: was Ching Shih truly the most successful pirate in history? Or was she something else entirely? The first ruler of a maritime nation without borders. If this story gripped you, if the image of a courtesan turned queen of the sea won't leave your mind, then stay with us. Because there are more battles, more secrets, and more forgotten empires hidden beneath the waves. Hit subscribe now, so you don't miss the next forgotten clash of history. Because the past is full of storms, and we're only just setting sail.